This is David Dubal, and I'm very pleased to be with Jerome Rose. I just heard him privately in a very beautiful Chopin recital, and I've wanted to speak to him for a long time. We haven't really spoken formally in an interview since 1986. That was some year for you, wasn't it?
Well, it was a hallmark year for me because it was the Liszt centennial, the 100th anniversary of his death. And I was very fortunate to have an interview with you, radio. It's all over the web now. All of your interviews are all over the international web. And we were talking about Liszt a great deal. And I was playing on Liszt's birthday in 1986, October 22nd. And you
I remember it very well, Jerome. It was a very packed Tully Hall audience. I think you played the Benediction to God in the Solitude, and naturally the Sonata for Piano, which is one of your great obsessions, and all pianists, I think, love that piece.
Well, what should I say? It's very easy to be obsessed with Liszt because
Yes.
not only is the music obsessive, wonderfully descriptive of life in all of its manifestations,
Yes.
the life itself, his life, is phenomenal.
I call it the greatest life ever lived.
Well, there will be a lot of people who would agree with you
Yeah.
because it encompassed everything. And the man was aware of life on every level.
On every level. The sensitivity, the outreach to people, the helpfulness, the sainthood, really, of Liszt. But let's talk about the fact that you got, and this is a wonderful thing because often people work very hard for someone else, so to speak. You were all your life working for Liszt in a way whenever you recorded this immense discography that you have. But you were honored by the country where Liszt is really the symbol of many things. Is this it?
This is the first honor I received was this was from the Liszt Society of Budapest. This was for 6, at that time they were LPs, and that was the Année de Pèlerinage, the Years of Pilgrimage, and again the Benediction was also honored in its performance. And actually, fast forwarding the year 1986, in which I was very active with the Liszt Centennial, giving a wonderful, what should I say, a whole festival we did in Washington, D.C.
Was I there?
You were there.
Yes, yes, with
You
Alan
have
Walker
been, Alan Walker was there, and we had the Kennedy Center, we had the National Cathedral, we had the Smithsonian, we had the Library of Congress. It was quite a great, and the Hungarian government honored me for this contribution, which was very lovely. Many people did receive this, but I was very pleased to also be honored by the Hungarians.
Oh, I mean, you know, it's a treasure. And how interesting the thing is, isn't it? Look at that.
Yes, it is. Quite lovely. For those who will see this, it's quite a beautiful medal of some kind.
You know, Jerome, Liszt, of course, has been one of the backbones of your repertoire, but it's a big repertoire. I know that in the last 17 years alone at the International Keyboard Festival, that you have literally had a different and huge program every year. But Liszt is always somewhere there, but he's certainly not always predominant. Tell us a little bit about the...
I was very fortunate to actually have made many DVDs of Schumann, of Schubert, of Beethoven, Brahms, Chopin, and I've included all of these composers in these recitals. Basically, I've given a different recital every year at the festival. And indeed, as I recorded this evening, Chopin, very close to my heart, Chopin as well, because my father was born in Poland. He was a Polish subject, and I feel imbued with this Slavic blood, Jewish, but nevertheless Slavic influence.
It's all mixed now into one great Chopinism.
Well, as you know, so many of the great Chopin players were Jewish.
Of course,
and
of course.
From Hoffmann to Horowitz to Rubinstein, and I've always revered this great tradition and have been fortunate. Unfortunately, I never did hear Hoffmann, but certainly, as you know, the Horowitz legacy. I even heard him before his hiatus of 12 years. I heard him in San Francisco. It was quite a growing up period in San Francisco.
I want to get to that right now. This is where you were born, right?
I was born in Los Angeles, but I would consider San Francisco more my home.
Okay, this was, when you were born, this was like a champagne air. Everything was beautiful there. What was the experience growing up in this town, which is almost legendary?
Well, San Francisco is legendary, but also Los Angeles was legendary. And there was this, what very few people really know was the tremendous influx of the Russian emigres into Los Angeles. The movie industry attracted so many,
all of them, yes.
so many of the great Russian artists of that time. And I was very much under that influence. And actually, one of my first piano teachers was Loren Maazel's uncle, Marvin Maazel, who was a completely Russian-trained pianist. As with so many pianists of that period, my earliest training was of the Russian school. My Petrograd Conservatory was really at the hallmark of my early training.
How long were you living in Los Angeles as a
I was in Los
child?
Angeles 9 years. And then the family moved north to Berkeley and to San Francisco.
Okay, so I always thought you were a total native of San Francisco.
Not quite, but
Not quite, huh?
not quite. But California still is imbued in my psyche, and I love it dearly and miss it in many ways. And the gateway to the Pacific had a tremendous influence. The sensuality, the wine country, the beautiful setting.
All the things you still love.
All the things I still love, yes.
So this is an unusual setting for a young American to be in the West at that time, actually.
Well, not as unusual as you would think, because San Francisco was the home. Menuhin, Isaac Stern, Leon Fleischer, witnessed several of the great artists.
And in the war, of course, all of the emigres were here.
All the emigres, and I actually was the recipient of this emigration from the war. One of my, I mean, they all left 1935. In fact, all my teachers left during that early Hitler period. This is Harold Logan was the assistant to Egon Petrie. He was one of my great teachers. Adolf Bahler.
Really?
Left.
Bahler was in San Francisco,
Bahler
right?
was in San Francisco.
He was a very important influence on
Bahler
you.
was a great influence. He was the one that I worked with him for 4 years. I played with the San Francisco Symphony. I was soloist.
Oh, you played with the symphony as a child?
I was 15 at the time.
My goodness.
They made my debut. Played with them every year following that.
What piece?
I started the Schumann Concerto.
15.
And actually was graced with a wonderful conductor. Arthur Fiedler was the conductor, and he treated, one of the great things about him, he treated an unknown soloist, a young person, with such respect. He said, "Is there anything you want to go over? Let's do this again. I want to make you comfortable."
Oh, you must have felt very good. Well, that must have been an impetus for you, you know, to have that encouragement early.
Well, the impetus was the whole city was in back of their talents. That was one of the nice things about San Francisco. You were recognized very early on, and they promoted you, and they helped you, and they were very, very supportive of the young talents that came from that city. And as you say, many of the great talents went on to very great careers.
Yes, absolutely.
It was
there's a whole book on that alone, music in California.
Bahler was the one that introduced me to Rudolf Serkin, and I remember my first performance with Serkin at the Mark Hopkins Hotel. I played Opus 101 Beethoven from beginning to end.
What age?
17.
That's pretty early for 101.
Yes. He made it known that he said, young man, I don't think you quite know what you're doing. But I went on to actually record that piece just a few years ago. It was been with me for more than half a century. But I did go to Marlborough, and Serkin had invited me, and this was the watershed in my life, being with Van Cliburn and James Levine and Malcolm Frager, Anton Querty.
So you had a charmed adolescence in a sense.
Charmed in the sense that I had excellent teaching along
What about
the way.
the home life, the parents, any friends that knew and understood you, things like that?
Well, San Francisco was a hotbed of real performance. I had a brother who was a fabulous violinist, studied with Naum Linder, who was concertmaster. He was Isaac Stern's teacher. He was a very important influence. One of the conductors that I had worked with through many concerts his name was Dennis Berg. He's no longer with us anymore, but we were in Czechoslovakia together. We were in the Radio Éireann Orchestra in Dublin. We were together, and these are all people, you know, the friends of your youth are carried through
Yes.
your entire life.
Jerome, this was, though, an unusual childhood because it gave you a confidence which I think you have always had in your life, even if you've been like, well, it's not what I still want for my art, I want to get it better and better. You're always unhappy with it, yet you always are going up, forward. That must have happened in the childhood atmosphere.
Well, you have to understand that I, from the age of 13, frequented the War Memorial Opera House. I heard every opera. I heard every symphony, all the visiting orchestras. I heard every
And they were really there then. They
I heard
truly
every
were.
single soloist. I heard the debuts of Oistrakh and Gilels. I heard Heifetz. I heard Szigeti. I heard all the great artists. I heard Solomon in this performance. In my early youth, I even heard the great Beno Mazejevich. So I was steeped in this. Everyone came to San Francisco.
Yes.
They were on the circuit.
Yes, if you were in Des Moines, this would have not happened.
This would not have happened. So even, and then of course, very early on, I frequented the San Francisco Conservatory, where I went half day to the conservatory every morning, studying harmony, counterpoint, and history, and then I had a half day in the normal high school. So
What was the high school like compared to
well, the high school had many, actually, you had a very informed principal, and he didn't mind my going half a day. And many of us did go half a day, but I had all this very early training, and great preparation for hitting New York, which I did at 18, studying with Leonard Shure. This was Serkin who actually said, no, you must go to Leonard Shure. I
didn't know that Serkin was an admirer of Leonard Shure.
He was an absolute admirer. I was on my way to Vienna, actually. I had my letter of credit, I had my passport, I had everything. He said, there's nobody to study with in Vienna. This was the time when the vacuum of artists, the whole diaspora of artists.
We're all here.
They were all here in New York at the time. Now you have a whole new generation that is developed there. But at the time, he really believed that this was the place to come to study.
How did you feel leaving this actually comforting home life in a way in San Francisco, coming to New York? It must have been a very different environment for you.
Well, the real shock came at Marlborough when I was with the best and the brightest of Curtis and the best and the brightest of that level of pianists of the American piano world, which was phenomenal at the time.
What do you mean shock? Did you think you were so great, and then all of a sudden you're
the
with...
shock is what I didn't know. I mean, I was there with Van Cliburn, I was there with Malcolm Frager, Antoine Querty, and people who actually had tremendous knowledge of the repertoire, and it was an enormous experience, and I had never heard music on this level. That was the summer that Serkin had recorded six Mozart concerti alone. He was practicing 8, 9, 10 hours a day.
And you heard him practice?
I heard him practice. No one worked harder than Rudolf Serkin.
And why did he work so hard? Was it the piano was harder for him, perhaps, I've heard?
I think Serkin wanted to be one of the great pianists. And he was of the generation of Horowitz. He was of the generation of Rachmaninoff, the generation of Rubinstein. And he wanted to be one of those notables. I think it was there was no absolute fanatical ambition.
A driven man.
Driven beyond belief. And a great artist, I mean, knowledge of the chamber music and the vocal repertoire. I still remember Doppelgänger with Marcel Sanger singing and Claude Frank playing. I'd never heard Lieder, the German Lieder sung in such a way that it was transformative. You had never experienced music, drama. Even in opera, I never had experienced the kind of one-on-one drama of the poetry, the words, and the music synthesizing such an effect upon me. It was cathartic, and this has been with me, actually. These experiences have been with me.
Well, you've continued with accompanying in the Winterreise of Schubert.
Yes, of course. But I mean, let's put it this way: you cannot explain the inner life of how you become transformed by influences, by teachers,
Yes.
by the environment in which you live. I mean, it's a different reality. It's a transcendental life.
Well,
that
you
we
must
aspire.
feel at odds with our time, because the young don't have these transcendental experiences very easily.
Not very
They hardly
easily.
relate to anyone.
The transcendental artist has always been at odds with the society. You preserve that sanctity of your soul, and I think everyone learns to build some sort of encasement around that, because you can't survive otherwise. I mean, the world is basically disinterested in the life of the artist.
Yes, almost hostile at times.
Almost hostile time, but you understand
Yes.
that. And I
Yes.
think books have been written about this since time began.
And yet there are people like Sirkin, like many, like Horowitz. Many once said, we need people like him because he would give his life for the piano. Sirkin does this. Do you think that this is one of the essential qualities in the formation of a great concert pianist? This obsession constantly.
It's the constant obsession, but it is the desire to live life on a different plane, on a different level.
Well
And it's
said.
on a daily, you're climbing that gradus ad parnassum on a daily basis, because there is something very divine in great art. It is eternal, and you want to touch something that is eternal. And it's an eternal force within every artist. At least you should feel that way. You are, I mean...
Well, then you're not really an artist if you don't
Well,
feel
of course.
that. It's
I mean,
impossible.
I'm touching the music of Chopin, which to me is eternal.
Yeah.
And although in 1,000 years it may not exist in the same way, certainly the desire to reach that transcendental moment, which every artist wishes and aspires for, will certainly be in all the great works that take place. And I think you have to feel that way. You have to feel the benediction of God in solitude. And Liszt understood this, and we go full circle back to his desire for the transcendental meaning of life.
Oh, so well
And
said.
of course, but this, I think every art, if you don't, maybe, I really believe you need to articulate this in words. I often ask students, what is great playing, and what is it that you want from your own career and from your own life? And then you just can't say, I want to win the competition.
Right.
I want to play. No, I say, what is your life? What is the meaning of your life?
Yes, you mentioned in speaking the Gradus ad Parnassum, and of course Chopin taught these etudes of Clementi to his students. There's nothing like the continuity of tradition in piano playing, but here is this aspiration actually put in print as early as 1819 when these 100 etudes of Clementi came out, and it's absolutely thrilling. Now I ask you this: you sometimes are hard on yourself, but I think that deep down you're still excited that you are in the arts and that you're a pianist. I think it just makes you happier.
Well, it's the eternal struggle to be or not to
You're
be.
not against that struggle then at all.
But you cannot become something without the struggle. You cannot turn your soul inside out. This is not something that happens easily. I mean, actors understand this completely, and we are. What are we? But on the stage of life, trying to create something meaningful out of mere existence. This is the whole purpose of the artist's life, is to touch something that has an eternal force and to become part of this. Otherwise, what is the meaning? You're merely taking up space. And I think this is something that every artist aspires to. I mean, and you accept the frustrations. You accept even within the recognition.
Yes.
I mean, I remember reading about Robin Williams. He said the worst thing that happens is when he has an enormous success. How does he meet this standard?
Yes.
And we're always trying to meet the standard that we have established for ourselves.
Yes, the famous story of Olivier. He just did an amazing Hamlet, and he's in his dressing room, and there's a party, and he's in despair, and they're knocking on the door. Larry, Larry, I mean, it was the greatest Hamlet of your career. And he comes out, he peeks his head, and he says, yes, yes, I know, but can I do it again?
Right. Well, the great story, and it has to be told because I knew somebody who was at the concert, and this was the great concert at the Champs-Élysées of Arturo Benedetto Michelangelo, who disappeared after playing the Four Ballades of Brahms. And they thought, what happened? Was he ill? Was he ill prepared? Why did he leave the hall? He left the hall because he had finally played the performance, and he wanted to cherish the great moment and not spoil it by coming out and playing another piece. He wanted to at least live that transcendental moment.
He was a selfish but wonderful man. The audience is waiting for him to come back, but he is now cherishing the moment. And I understand it. I understand.
He is cherishing the moment. In any event, having recorded Chopin this evening, I'm cherishing the moment. And what has happened with Chopin, of course, is I think he's very underrated. I think he's very underrated. And the great,
yes, even though he's the most played of all piano composers, and probably one of the most, if not the most, universally loved composers, he's still underrated. Explain that.
Underrated in the sense that because he was so popular and has continued to be so popular, he has not reached this pantheon of what great composers are supposed to be all about, the large form. But the fact remains is the fact that he mastered whatever form he touched and that he struggled with it is enough. As many people have said, there's more music in a mazurka of Chopin than in a grand opera of some other composer.
Oh, God.
So I mean,
Yes.
it's his struggle, and it's well documented, his struggle of how he would work incessantly over and over and over again until it was
Yes,
right.
you know, George Sand, she said it was heartbreaking to hear him at Nantes in her country estate working 6 weeks on just one passage, you know, and then at the end probably, she said, just keeping the first version of it, but he had to go through every possibility of this for perfection.
Well, the amusing part is everybody thinks, oh, it's so wonderful to be a genius, so wonderful to have that recognition that the whole world appreciates you. It's hell. It's a living hell. Talent is a burden. You can't escape it. You can't hide from it. It drives you forward. It tortures you. It's a yoke on your neck. You can never stand, because what happens is you are critical of yourself and you are critical of the world equally.
Yes,
Consequently, you can't stand what somebody else is doing because they don't have the talent, and you can't stand yourself unless you're actually paying lip service or at least working your talent, because it will kill you.
Yes.
It's a passion and a kind of energy that unless it comes out will implode. And I find that you see this all the time with extremely gifted people. They do not accept and cherish their talent. They don't revere the gifts that they have, and consequently they can't escape. There is no escape from the talented person.
No escape.
There is no escape.
No, in Chopin's case, the escape was that George Sand leaves him, that he's so sick, he's coughing so badly, and he's writing no more than 2 pages the last 2 years of his life. He writes in a letter, "Where has my art gone?" But the fact is that if you analyze his art, he's exploited every genre to the end, and that's where it went. He didn't know where to go. And now with the life being so tragic, you know, you played before the last mazurka of Chopin. I mean, it's so moribund, it's so filled with coughing and death and despair, this marvelous 1.5 pages.
Well, the amazing thing is that even the Fantasy Polonaise, one of the later pieces, is how his whole interest in counterpoint, his whole growth as a composer, and his pressing the envelope, and going out and reaching out to newer dimensions all the time, and reaching inside himself constantly. And I find these are amazing works. They are amazing. And Liszt, of course, was also the guy who was constantly striving. All composers, they're always in a state of evolution. They're never happy. No. They're never living on their laurels. They're always striving.
Goethe said, "To live is to strive," and please, when you want to begin, then the work will be done. If you procrastinate, which is the artist's, easiest way out, oh, I haven't done this in 5 years, I can't practice anymore, I can't write the book, I can't write the poetry. It's because the wait is so fantastic. Because you're going to always hear someone and you'll say, I can't play it the way Horowitz. It's just he's greater than me. Or Chopin says, no, Bach is greater than me. It's just no rest for the weary.
Nobody is greater than yourself.
That's true in the long run, but we don't know it.
No one is greater than yourself. You are as best as you can. I said, one of my favorite remarks is, nobody plays the piano better than they want to.
Oh, that's very good.
And the other thing, of course, these are aphorisms. But nobody ever had a career greater than they wanted.
Yes, or Horowitz would say to me, even Mr. Horowitz is not Horowitz.
Well, as you know, the problem of Horowitz was being Horowitz.
Yes, exactly.
It plagued him his whole life.
Exactly.
It plagued him his whole life. He knew, first of all, he knew what was expected. And he had to meet that standard. He was a victim of his own life, his own standard. He was a victim of it,
and he couldn't disappoint easily. And when you asked him in a very confidential moment, tell me what you feel about yourself next to Rachmaninoff, which I asked him, and he said, oh, maybe I am like an oak, but Rachmaninoff is a redwood. You see.
Well, thank God for the oaks and the redwoods.
Let's get you into New York, Jerome. So you come here and you're not going to Vienna. Did you ever regret that?
Oh, I eventually did go to Vienna.
Oh.
I got my bachelor's at the Mannes College, and I got my master's. I was very close to with Leonard Schur was the bachelor's degree at Mannes, and I was very close to the Juilliard Quartet, and very, very active with them. And actually,
did Leonard Schur get you into the great Austrian German repertoire, or did you have that always?
I was in it to begin with, and he merely confirmed where I was anyway. Being the great Schnabel protege and the great protagonist of this whole repertoire, he's a marvelous genius pianist himself. The great moments were listening to him at lessons. So I lived this repertoire. I lived the great moments, and I really believe that's a sign of a great pianist. You have to be able to play a great Brahms, a great Schumann, a great Beethoven. It isn't just a
the
limited
eclecticism
repertoire.
is very important today.
I think it
yes.
just is not. And ironically, he was a Russian trained pianist who actually went to Schnabel when he was 14, and he took it hook, line, and sinker. This was a great.
Everyone seemed, Jerry, to take Schnabel hook, line, and sing. What's the word?
Sinker.
Singer. Fleischer never got over him. Claude Frank never got over him. Obviously, Leonard Schur never got. He must have been something. Did they ever talk to you about him?
Oh, all the time.
Really?
Of course. But one of the problems that Schnabel did is he set himself up. You're good, kid, but you're never going to be as good as me. That famous line from Cincinnati Kid that Edward G. Robinson says to Steve McQueen. And he set himself up where he was always like mercuric. You could never get him to say, you're the next generation. I have given you all I can. Go forth and be who you are. He was always the guy who could always somehow stick the screw in and undermine that final confidence.
And why? Why would a teacher do this?
I think one of the 19th century mottos of German training was,
yes.
If you can survive me, you can survive anything.
But many didn't survive their teacher.
Many didn't survive their teacher, but there was a sense of real, I can't say it was this, was it a kind of psychological destruction? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Mm-hmm. But this whole sense of, I have to make it as tough as possible for you in order for you to survive in the outside world.
Yes, it existed a long, long time, this kind of concept of how the teacher should react to the student. Yes. Now, we've been talking about Liszt, and for a long time, I want to know if you maybe resented it, because you have this wide repertoire and this tremendous range of and love for the German Austrian composers, but you became, in a way, for a while at least, maybe you worked yourself out of it, I think you have, but you were typecast as the Liszt pianist.
Well, that became very easy. I didn't know any Liszt.
Uh-huh.
I was offered a contract to record all the Clementi sonatas by George Mendelsohn, head of Bach's, record all the Clementi sonatas or the Years of Pilgrimage of Liszt. Now, I didn't know a single work of Liszt. I mean, I knew,
Really?
I had at one time played the Mephisto Waltz, which I loved when I was 16, and I learned the Liszt E-flat Concerto, and I knew one Hungarian Rhapsody. That was it. So I started with absolutely nothing.
God, what a repertoire you
I
developed.
started with, he said, give me the timings. So a week later, I actually went through the entire Année de Pèlerinage, and I came in with the timings of all the complete works, and I recorded all 3 years. And this, of course, won my pre-disc. And it was so successful, he said, well, let's do the Harmonie Poétique and the Legends and the Polonaises and the
Transcendentals, yeah.
That's right. All of it. So this started the whole ball of my Lisztian experience. And I remember, and when I won the Prix de Disque, I forget his name, he was one of the professors. I was on the jury of the Munich competition.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you just won the prize. He said, I just heard you. I said, okay, this is ridiculous. I mean, I wasn't even a Lisztian. He said, I'm a completely classical trained pianist. He said, that's why you play Liszt so well.
Very, very smart.
That's what he said, because you know how to play Beethoven and Schubert and Schumann and Brahms.
And Liszt knew how to play everyone, and was
Liszt
the first to ever play Beethoven sonatas.
I respected the score.
Yes.
I brought my classical training to the learning and to the performance of Liszt.
Yes. He's often played just too much, even in the most serious works, as a gypsy.
Yes, he's played like a gypsy, and of course he played the entire Schubert, he played the entire Beethoven, he played the entire
man
repertoire.
to play all 32, not in cycle, but throughout his career, in all.
So what does that tell you about and the great symphonies, transcribing the symphonies,
everything,
transcribing all the Schubert songs? What does that tell you about Liszt and how Liszt should be played and the respect to the score?
Oh my God, Beethoven's, in Weimar, Beethoven's portrait was everywhere.
All right.
You know, that was the main composer.
So what is this telling us about how Liszt should be played? In any event, this is what I have always brought to Liszt, and I really can't stand undisciplined playing. That so much is going on with the works of Liszt, and of course so many composers today.
And that's where he has become underrated because of his interpreters. They either don't have enough technique, as Busoni said, to play him properly, or they don't respect him as the composer.
They don't respect him, and they do not understand his transcendental desires.
No. Arthur Friedheim, Jerry, actually said that he wasn't quite of this world. There was a spiritual aura about him that was mystical.
Well, this has been by all the people who've heard him. They wrote that his playing was transcendental.
Yeah.
And this, of course, as we go back full circle to what I said, the desire of every artist to have those transcendental moments. And that's what he wanted. And the music had to be transcendental. And unfortunately, it's not ironically, the music is not widely known. People really don't know the Years of Pilgrimage. They really don't know the Harmonie Poétique. They really don't know all the transcendental etudes.
Not at all. We're talking about hundreds of pieces in various forms, the transcriptions, there is no such thing, as Aaron Copland wrote in an essay, of any Liszt piece. You may not think it's completely wonderful, but there's going to be something startling in it.
Well, once again, like Beethoven, he was one of the great dramatists, one of the great music dramatists of our time. And of course, if all you have to do is look at the opera transcriptions, how much he understood and loved opera beyond belief.
I want to get you into Europe. When did you go first?
I actually got a Fulbright to Vienna following my master's degree at Juilliard. The year was 1961, and then a lovely gentleman who was a great supporter of mine. I should mention these names because I never forgot. Mark Schubart was the dean.
Dean of Juilliard.
The dean of Juilliard, and then also he had great connections with the International Institute of Education. So I got a scholarship or a stipend to attend Bolzano, Italy, and compete in the Busoni competition.
How old were you?
I was not yet 23 at the time.
The Busoni was a competition that has the greatest name in the world after Liszt. I mean, this is the most revered pianist. This is the one I myself would just love to have heard. My own teacher, Arthur Lesser, said, it was shocking. It was shocking. Everything he played was shocking.
Oh,
I can never forget a note.
The great interpreters.
So
yes.
here you are, and there's a tradition of fine winners, you know, that have won this. Did you feel that you could do it, or because you did win?
I always felt I could do it.
Okay, so that confidence we were talking about.
It's not. I think it's confidence, but it's also this will to survive. I quote very often to my students Billie Jean King's, "Show me a good loser, and I'll show you a loser."
That's wonderful.
So I did not go there to lose. I did not go there for the experience. I went there to win. I didn't have that much experience with international competitions, but I went there to win. And I remember everybody went on the picnic, and I didn't for any reason. I stayed back, and I practiced. Where's Rose? Well, he's practicing. And I think the jury was impressed the fact that I actually was there to practice. I was there to win.
So how did you feel about winning this?
It was a big thing. It was a big thing. I had actually been told by one of the jurists that there was not going to be any first prize. It was a tradition. The last person to win it.
I judged that myself, that competition.
The last one was Marta Argerich, and that was 4 years previously. And they said, well, there won't be a winner. There won't be a winner. But actually, I was the winner. So I was sitting in the bar across the street when they announced the winning, because I wasn't I wasn't going to win. So I wasn't going to sit there and just watch the whole proceeding.
Right.
So they had to come and get me. I was in the bar.
Were you drunk?
No, I was getting drunk. And we all got drunk that night after the announcement, because a lot of lovely people.
Tell me, Jerome, did it launch you in a sense, as competitions had a chance at least at that time to do that?
At that time, Busoni was a big competition. My first concert 3 weeks later was playing Beethoven Third Piano Concerto at San Carlo, Naples, at the Opera House.
Oh my God! How was that? What kind of feeling was that to
know?
You're the greatest opera house of all time?
I wrote. There's some things that you're never prepared for. I mean, that same year I had to learn Tchaikovsky Concerto and the Emperor Concerto, and I remember playing a full recital in Torino, Italy, and then there was a live broadcast the next morning. I had no rehearsal of the Emperor, and I said there are things they never taught you at Juilliard. They never taught you how to play a phenomenal performance on a half-hour rehearsal, and you better have the confidence. Otherwise, you're going to get destroyed.
Was the conductor any good?
Conductor was very good, but he conducted it. You know, his Emperor Concerto. He conducted it 50 times.
Sure.
I was playing it for the first time.
Were you scared?
Oh yeah, of course. You're always scared.
Big audience at the
biggest
theater.
Live broadcast, RAI, the radio all over Italy. This was my signature of winning the Busoni. I was broadcast immediately. I even have the performance. I have a copy of it.
Of the performance?
I have a copy of the performance, yeah. And we did it. There are things, you're intrepid when you're young. You do things that you have absolutely no idea about.
Later on, you say, how in the hell did I do that?
To this day, how the hell did I do this?
Tell me, you love Italy, you've remained it. Byron called Italy the garden of the world. Tell me, do you have a feeling of audiences that are, for instance, an American audience, an Italian? Are they different to you, or?
I think if indeed you are in the zone, as my lovely wife Julie Kadersha says, if you're in the zone, there's a collective feeling that spreads through an audience.
I think so
there's
too.
There's something special going on, and people feel this. There's something in the tones. There's something. As I said, one of the things that any artist has to do is the tones have to reverberate off the membrane of their soul. And if the tones are reverberating off the membrane of your soul, that's getting out there. And you see this with great singers, you see this with great performers. Somehow there's a transcendental moment, and that shoots through the audience. And they know something special is happening. So I think this is any audience anywhere. And I think that's what you aspire to. I think many performers say there's no such thing as a bad audience.
It's the performer, really.
It's the performer, yeah. And you see this even with kids. Kids pick up the seriousness of what a performance is. If somebody's there And you should never play down to an audience. I've been in concerts where the performer has played down to the audience. And
why would they do such a thing?
There are a lot of people who are snobs. A lot of performers are snobs. They don't. This was I was sitting. I won't even name the performer. He was a very famous, and it was a pickup concert. It was on his way from between Paris and Rome or something. So he had to run out. I happened to be in the town. I heard him, and I said, "Don't ever play down to an audience. You never know who is sitting there. You never know.
No, that's right.
You never know how. And you are going to be judged." And I resented it. I resented that it wasn't his best performance, and he didn't care.
He didn't care.
He didn't care. And I said, this is very dangerous to ever slide into that. You should never be, self-possessed to think that nobody knows the difference. Everybody knows the difference.
Even subliminally, yes, it's true. If it's great, and someone knows in their way.
Yeah.
How did you feel after your Emperor in Naples?
That was the third. Well, I felt wonderful. I mean, it was 5:30 in the afternoon, and it was all the most beautiful women of Naples. They all gathered there, and they promenade, and they all came backstage, and I felt wonderful. Paul Strauss was an American conductor, and he was very supportive and so on. But yes, you were in the big leagues right then, right there.
That's
Trial by fire.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Trial by fire. No. This is what you learn as any pianist learns. And I even had the year before, or the year after, actually, I was playing a Mozart concerto at the Maggio Musicale in Florence. Who was playing the night before an all-Mozart program? Sviatoslav Richter. I was playing at 4 o'clock the next day, the same piano, the same hall, the same audience. I said, there's no place to hide. There's nowhere. There is the world standard, and that is it, and you better make sure you are on the world standard. There's nothing else to say. And I still remember, he was practicing all day, and I heard him, and I met him. It was quite phenomenal. I remember Carlo Zecchi going backstage, and he was wringing his hands. He said, "This is terrible. I've only played this program 12 times, and it's so new, so fresh to me." He played it 12 times already, and it was new and fresh. Gives you an idea of what it takes to really feel comfortable with a program.
Oh my God, yes.
But he was, talk about a fanatic. Was there anyone more fanatical than Richter about the piano?
And Zecchi was, this is a forgotten name. It's a shame because he was a very fine pianist and
protege.
Conductor. Yes,
another
absolutely,
protege,
yes.
A great pianist, highly recognized.
One of the finest
At that time
Italian.
he was conducting at the time. Carlo Zecchi was a very great name in Italy and in the piano world as well.
When you came back to New York, what did they say about now the new Busoni winner? What did Leonard Shore say? What did anyone that you knew said?
It was sort of big news, but we will not even enter into the world of managerial representation. And being an American has never been a plus in the piano world.
No.
Being an American, and I always think of our good dear friend and our colleague Earl Wild, who actually got crushed between all the great European figures, and
he truly was, yes.
And he was absolutely one of the great pianists.
One of the great virtuosos.
One of the great
history.
pianists, and rising above this. And
I used to say to him, "What a shame! You have had a wonderful career, but think of the career you would have had if your name was Waldinsky instead of Wild." And he said, "I've thought of it. Believe me."
No, absolutely. And of course, because we do represent a European tradition. The fact is, as you know, I mean, I had the best of the European training because the diaspora, the Hitler years, brought the best of the great artists to these shores, and these were all my teachers and my mentors.
Yeah.
They didn't have that in Europe.
Greatest time in American cultural history, that moment.
And as you know, who was the great Russian pianist? Van Cliburn. Why?
Right.
Because he had the greatest of the Russian traditions.
Right.
And of course, they recognized that the moment he went to Moscow. They recognized his great Russian tradition.
Yeah.
So that's what goes on like that. Anyway, we can cover so much more territory.
Yes. Let's go on now with your career. Did you ever get to play a Liszt concerto with a really major conductor?
Yes, certainly with.
I think you did Schulte, right?
So the
second
Schulte.
concerto.
I did the first piano concerto with Sergio Commissione.
Oh.
And I did with George Schulte in Chicago. I did the second Liszt piano concerto, also broadcast. I have a wonderful. It's actually on the web. I put the performance out on the web.
So you must have liked it.
It was interesting because the first performance, there were 3 performances. He made a mistake. He didn't wait for me to finish a cadenza, and there were some bloopers, and it was very upsetting to me because it was, you invest so much into this. Also, I mean, previously I'd actually played the Totentanz with the Berlin Philharmonic, and I had done that. So talk about works of Liszt. I did the Franck Symphonic Variations, and I did the Totentanz of the Berlin. And that was already 1975. I did the Liszt. So
was that the greatest orchestra you played with?
Well, that in Chicago.
Chicago. Was Schulte as great as they say? I mean, I
Schulte
never quite thought so.
Schulte was tired. He'd been recording with Kiri Tekhanova, I think, Handel's Messiah or something like that. He was tired. And that was his last concert of the season, and the plane was waiting for him to go to Bermuda with his wife. I mean, it's not a question. Everyone, you can't be great all the time. Mm-hmm. He was tired. It was the end of the season. And yes, he was great. We had one really great performance, and that was the one that got out on the radio. But he was tired, He was,
Did he talk to you? Did he?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had met him previously in London, and he was very supportive, and I was very pleased to play with him. But as I say, he was tired. Mm-hmm. As in, fatigue has damaged and hurt.
Yeah, well, it's a tough world being out there on stage, and then no time to rest, and then the conductor is constantly trying to learn a new score. I mean, the idea of a Metropolis who was literally driven out of New York City, one of the great conductors, critics actually, and the orchestra themselves didn't help him. This man memorized everything he ever played in public. The strain on him was unbelievable.
Well, the strain on that level is no one can even appreciate that unless they've been there. I mean, we can't even imagine what it's like to be a Roger Federer and try to be number one, throughout your entire career. Yeah. I mean, we know that, but
we watch and we just always it's above normal, but we don't really understand how big it is.
One of the important things, and it's very clear to anyone, is that you need a balance. You need a personal life which balances the career.
Well, you've had the personal life. Did your children get in the way of your work or anything else? Because you've been a pretty good father.
I prioritized the children to my career. I thought that being a good father was far more important to me than any career that I might have had. I felt that very strongly.
You really did?
Yes. Well, if you have to, I realized the price of not being a good father would have been too painful in my life.
Well, the kids have worked out very well.
The kids have worked out very well, and then they're very appreciative. I don't think they really know what was done in their name. But I think as they pursue their careers, I think they have a sort of an idea. No, this was very important to me. One of my favorite remarks is, what does a human being need? What does a man, what does a woman need? Everything.
It's a wonderful remark. They need everything.
What do you need? Everything. And I needed everything. Mm-hmm. And still do.
Yeah, you still do, don't you?
And still do.
You want it all.
I think I wanted it all, and I did my best to get it all.
Now tell us about the fact that did your kids play musical instruments? Did they love music? Did you inculcate that in them?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I have one is a wonderful cellist. He works for the World Bank. He's one of the great figures in development. And my other daughter works for the Metropolitan Opera. She was also a violinist. And the last one has her medical degree and is now an impassioned violist. She'd rather be a violist than anything in the world.
Jerome, you've been quite a dad.
No, I listen. I have to say the heredity and genetics play a tremendous role in the identities of children. And I don't think, I think they would be like this whether I was around or not. I just think that genetically they inherited this. I just think it's there. I think they're all artists.
So you're admitting to the world right now that you have good genes.
I'm admitting that, but I think they're all artists. And once again, it's very curious. They cannot stand not being artists, no matter what they do.
Interesting.
They need to be artists. They are absolutely driven.
That's not genetic. You put that in their brains.
Maybe I did.
Yeah.
Maybe I did, but I'm not sorry.
Let's talk about the pieces you were playing for me before, because this is an all Chopin recital that you're doing. The Polonaise Fantasy, we remarked a little bit about it. You want to just talk a tiny bit about some of these pieces, because Chopin has always obsessed me.
Well, the Polonaise Fantasy is exactly that. It's a Polonaise, and it's also a fantasy. It's also a very large work, and as we know, Chopin obsessed over the large pieces. The three sonatas, the first one, of course, was much like Hummel, and the two he actually worked on and worked on and worked on. And I'm sure at the end, this is one of the later pieces of the fantasy, I think he was reaching out on a completely different level. I mean, there's nothing like it in the repertoire. Its beginning, its harmonic imagination.
The two sonatas, you mean?
Well, the sonatas
or the Fantasy Polonaise.
The Fantasy Polonaise is really one of the late.
No, it's one of the visionary works of all time.
It's one of the visionary works of all times, and as I say, you know, this is the man reaching for the moon. He wanted to get to a different level, and he wanted to perfect his art to a different level. This is no longer a miniaturist. This is no longer a man who's writing salon music. He is writing for the ages on a higher level. And of course, the problem, of course, is how do you get there as a performer? How do you put it all together? And how do you balance this and make a great performance out of all of this? And this is, of course, the art of the piano. It's the art of the great dramatist. You have to understand that great performers, great pianists, are music dramatists.
Yes, I think nobody understands that the pianist of all musicians, with his amazing literature and his aloneness, is playing more roles than any musician could possibly play. You have to be in Bach a specific actor, you have to be in Chopin another kind, and that's why it is so difficult to be a pianist, because so many people play everything the same way.
Well, but I don't know at what point, I wonder at what point do you realize you are the single actor on the stage and your script is the music that you are presenting. I don't know at what point you understand that is your task.
A true soliloquy to the gods.
True soliloquy,
you're just talking to them and singing to them.
The music is coming through your body like a singer, and any great pianist is feeling that of a singer. They are breathing, they are living the music physically. And this is what makes a performance, is the whole physical, and that all of this. And of course, the great performers understand this. I don't know how the younger people get this, unless they have some sort of a role model that they live every note. And I think this is what makes a great performance, of course.
Truly, you have to be the Hungarian gypsy in the Rhapsodies, and you have to be a true mazurka dancer, in a sense, in the mazurkas. It's so variegated. The late Beethoven, you have to be an enigmatic, and yet the last movement of the Opus 111 is like, it's beyond our ability to use words to describe it. So this is your great literature, I am convinced, and I think you must be too. There is no literature to compare with it, nor anything basically more romantic than the one person on stage alone. You don't need a violinist, you don't need a singer, you don't need a harpist, you don't need anything. You just need the gods to bless you with a little inspiration.
Well, what is to me so important is that when someone walks out on stage, you sense their purpose of being there. And the audience picks up on this. This is, I often say, do you think your playing is important? And you have to say, how important is it? And you have to say to any young person, yes, it's important. I said, why are you there if you don't think it's important? And I think there is always the religious overtone of the messianic figure, the person that has a message, and then that message has to come out. And this is, of course, what makes a great concert, is that you're hearing the messages.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Somebody said to me once, it was a great compliment to me, he said, "You play as if you know the words." And it was quite an interesting comment.
Very, very interesting. How do you get across all of these thoughts that we've had and talked about to the students? Because you've had a very, very long and large teaching career. You've taken it very seriously.
I think like any parenting situation, I think it is by the way you live, by the way you play. It's just basically, I mean, I learned where I am hearing great piano playing and hearing what great piano playing meant. And I think this is basically, and one of my favorite remarks also, if you want to become a master, you study with a master. And I think you have to be close to a master to really gain whatever mastery you need to know. I don't think it happens by itself. You have to study those masters. It's a hereditary art form. Like all great art forms, it's hereditary. It has a whole history in back of it. And you study these great performers.
The history in back of it is what I'm worried about with the young today. They have very little awareness of that.
One of the great moments is that what is your listening library?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you have heard? Because as we know in music, if you don't hear it, you can't play it.
Yeah.
You have to know what you want to hear. There are no miracles. God does not divine you. You have to know what are the tones, how are the tones put together, how is the phrase constructed, where is it going, where is it coming from, what is the drama, what is the intent, what is the atmosphere that is being created. And of course, this is what the art is all about. It is a language of such refinement, enormous refinement.
Do you fear, Jerry? Do you fear that that it will be lost eventually in our more Philistine materialist?
I think it will be. I think it will. No one knows how long the piano will last in history. It certainly
it's done very well for 300 years. It's amazing.
It's done very well, and God knows that we have millions of Chinese who are killing themselves to create music on their own. So it will last. I think art, as long as human life exists, art will exist, and I think the desire for great art, whatever that medium they may be, will exist. I feel that the great romance of the 19th century may get lost. The lifestyle, the elegance,
Don't you think it's lost?
No, because I'm trying to keep it alive,
Okay.
and you're trying to keep it alive. And hopefully the next generation, I mean, you've influenced thousands of students, and I've influenced.
I hope I've done a good job.
And no, I think love will keep it alive. I think the love
It's
of
a
it.
beautiful statement. Love will
Love
keep it alive.
Mm-hmm. Without love, it will die.
Jerome, we've talked about several, to say the least, great people in your life, Shore and Schulte and Sirkin. Did you ever encounter the great Casals?
Well, in 1965, Casals was conducting and actually giving master classes at Marlborough, and I happened to be there, and I was actually able to play in a master class. And as he was demonstrating, I was playing with him, and he was giving a lesson. So this was one of my great moments in music as well. I mean, one of the interesting things about Casals is you always would think about a great artist being very articulate with words. And when you went to a Casals master class, it was very simple. He would stop, and he said, speak, da, 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 dun, da, dun, dun, da, speak. And then he'd stop, just stop. You must sing. And he would sing these long phrases, and then he would demonstrate on the cello, and he said, stop. He said, you have to dance with this passage. You have to dance. Da, da, da. So what were the great moments and the great words? You have to speak, you have to sing, you have to dance. The three elements of music:
Incredible.
the rhythm, the speech, the words, and the beautiful long line, and the ability to move the body in a dance form that allows music to come alive and speak. I thought it was a miracle. I said, because he didn't need to philosophize. He didn't need to talk about, the great transcendental moments of this and that. He said, no, you make music, and the great moments will take place if you make the music come alive in its simplest, most beautiful form.
What's interesting is you soaked that whole lesson up very well. It's still with you.
Because these are the essentials.
Yeah,
you have to know how to speak, you have to know how to dance, you have to know how to sing. I mean, these are the three essentials of music.
So let's get to a concept. You're a very serious man.
I suppose I am, yes. I'm a serious man because I think life is serious. I believe that time is serious. I believe that as we are talking now, I want it to be after we are no longer here, somebody may watch it.
Yes.
And somebody might get something out of it.
Yes, of course.
Because I was here to serve a purpose, as were you.
I think
David.
every artist at heart
We're
has
here,
that. Yes.
we're here to serve a purpose. I want to go out. I just recently talked to Menachem Pressler, who's now 91. He's playing all over the world. He said, it took me to 91 to be recognized as one of the great solo pianists, which is something I always wanted. I mean, anybody can play trios, but to be a great soloist.
Oh, fantastic.
So he was
Isn't it wonderful?
He's wonderful. But I mean, he's alive, he's everywhere, and he's playing. No, this was his life. Playing, I always used to tease Menachem. I said, Menachem, why am I paying to buy a ticket to your concert? You're having such a wonderful time. You should be paying me.
Yeah, Schnabel had said that once when he was in Seville early in the 20th century, and he would give these incredible uncompromising programs, and he's playing the Diabelli variations, and he writes to his wife, he said, they don't know anything I'm doing, he said, and I'm having a great time, and they're suffering and paying the money. Oh, it's wonderful.
No, but one of the great things, I remember, he was a teacher, man. Nobody even remembers him. Actually, he was the teacher of Richard Good. Nobody. His name was not even. His name was Hans Neumann.
Yes.
And he was a wonderful pianist at Mannes. And he said, very interesting. He said, everybody thinks that the Diabelli is one of the great transcendental moments and profound in this. He said, it's one of the great spoofs. It's one of the great moments of musical humor.
Yes.
It's one of the great ironies of the genius of Beethoven saying, there's only one Beethoven. I'm it, the greatest set of variations. But you have to approach it, because the reason it is deadly is it lacks this perspective of the entire life of humor and tragedy and profundity, and it's the entire world encapsulated, and people play it in a one-dimensional way.
Yes, I heard a performance recently, 54 minutes, and I said to myself, if I had to hear this again, I'd rather be in prison for 54 minutes than to hear it. Yes, it's always the performer that will make even the greatest work.
Of course, but once again, it takes the imagination. You have to realize that these are great works of art that represent life.
Yes.
And life is not one-dimensional. Life is multi-dimensional at every time.
Yes, there's great comedy in Beethoven. He raises his fist when he's dying, as they say. It may be apocryphal, the comedy is over, but we know what seriousness he took that art.
Yes.
And the legacy, because when he was ready to commit suicide, when the hearing was going, he is saying in his testament to his brothers, no, I have no choice. You see, I have to give to my art. And that whole thing stimulated the great Romantic movement. These moments in time where art is greater than the self.
But the heroism.
Oh.
The heroism. And of course, this is what people don't really appreciate how heroic it is to walk out on a stage and stand naked in front of the world.
Exactly.
You
just hit something so important. I was saying once when I had to play, and I said to this man, very wise man, I said, I don't know if I can do it. I just don't know if I can do it. And he says, you get out there and you be naked.
But we are naked.
Yeah.
I often tell.
But we don't know that.
I often
we want,
tell students. I said, you think by playing safely, by not going to the ultimate, and not really affecting a real performance, that you are being secure, you're being safe. I said, you are revealing to the world exactly who you are. I said,
you are naked.
Better to go to the limit, to express the music to its fullest extent, and be the creative person, than be withdrawn and create, in a way, nothing. You should always strive to go to the essentials of whatever this music represents to you, because it is autobiographical. You do say who you are. One of my favorite remarks, which is used often, is that you play who you are. And if you want to be heroic, if you want to be a figure of importance, you must play in that manner. You have to believe that this is what you are doing is the most. I often joke about Horowitz, whom you know very well. I said, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he thought that the axis of the earth stopped so that God should hear his concert.
I'm sure he did. You know, when Busoni said this terrifying thing, he meant it, for he was unrelenting in his desire for mastery and greatness. And the legacy, even though we don't have recordings, the legacy is still enormous in the world, and Busoni was here. And he affected so many people. But he, in a letter, it was a terrifying thing. He says, I can tell within 10 seconds what faults you have as a human being. All I have to do is hear you play. Think of it. Think of it. Let's talk, though, Jerome, about mastery. Yes, it's great to have the psychological confidence and that you can go out and play nakedly and go to the extremes. But what about this at-home work, this endless encounter with the instrument and what composers have divined for the human hand? It's startlingly impossible at times. How do you, because many people can't push themselves into the mastery area or the over-mastery that they're able to do it in public. You must have grappled with this many times.
I go back to my previous remark. Nobody plays better than they want to. You have to have an image of how you want to play, what you are willing to accept, what you are willing to strive for, what you want to be, how you want to appear on a stage. You have to want it. And this is where the fanaticism comes in, that you cannot accept the phrase that isn't as perfect as you want. You cannot accept the note that's out of place. I mean, it drives, what does they say? The highest form of masochism ever derived by man, piano playing.
Well, I've said to many people the piano has killed more people.
It's killed a number of people. It's killed a number of people. But the fact remains is, everything is in perspective, of course. But it is true that in Liszt, there is a reason why he called them the transcendental etudes, because it is the complete synthesis of mind, body, and spirit. And this is basically any great performance is the synthesis of mind, body, and spirit. And the torture, and it is a kind of torture, of physically mastering an instrument and to be able to play it, is part of the process.
What if you don't have that in you?
Then you can't play.
That's all there is to it.
You just can't play. Then you stay in the realms of enjoying music, but it is a torturous thing, and this is why we start as kids. I was playing the piano 3.5 and 4. I was playing concerts at 6 and so on. I still remember Baron's training for the left hand. I still remember, my teacher, and when I was in tears, play it again, you made a mistake, all of this, and this is fundamental, and of course, and then the ability, and you see this, one of the great lessons, and all of us who study these things, and we're always concerned, is look at sports people, look at sports people, and look, I remember hearing a statistic on Tiger Woods, now it's not the case, he said, how many times did he miss a 2-foot putt in championship golf? Never. What does that mean? It means he practiced incessantly. Practiced incessantly. Yeah. And basically, if you want to play on that level, the brain needs to be resuscitated on a daily basis. You have to reprogram your whole mind in order to do this. And once again, one of my favorite remarks, of course, is how you practice is how you play. Mm-hmm. You have to have presented yourself. You have to practice as if you are on a stage. You have to practice with the gun at your head, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And you have to realize that unless you have this feeling, you will never be comfortable on a stage unless you practice what it is to be on a stage. And also in the way you express your music also. Yeah. I mean, you can't, I see constantly how students come in and they're playing as if they're in a studio. Mm-hmm. They're playing in the practice room. Mm-hmm. They're not playing on Carnegie Hall, right, or Tully Hall or the Berlin Philharmonic. And of course, when you play with orchestra, you have to be bigger in life. Otherwise, I mean, we see in international competitions all the time. They're very good soloists, wonderful soloists. They disappear in front of an orchestra. They don't know how to command a conductor and command an orchestra. Mm-hmm. The sense of rhythm, the sense of drama, the sense of tone. Your tone has to be bigger when you have 100 people in back of you on a stage. You have to learn how to do all of this. You have to believe.
You don't even realize how loud it is until you're there.
No, but I mean, you're covered up. I mean, 2 seconds, and we hear this all the time. And the commanding personality, that you command the conductor to play with your will. This is the way this piece goes. This is how I believe. Because they'll run right over you unless you feel that way.
Sure.
So but the personality is so much. Everybody is derogatory towards the quote, the personality, the charismatic figure. But that is everything.
Well, you have to have it if you're going to ever survive.
Everything. It's the electricity of the body. What do you feel when there's an electricity in the body?
Well, people say, oh, personality. Well, my God, that's everything. I mean, what do you think you're up there for? To just, smell a flower? No. But let's talk about a big problem. It's a problem for all children at this time, almost in every country that is industrialized. You have the parents almost driving children crazy with their constant desire for their future success. They've got to go to schools that are the best. They're preparing for college in age 5. The kids are doing soccer, they're playing tennis, they're doing so much that they're exhausted. And they're, of course, doing Little League, which has become now not sports, but constant competition. Piano has become constant competition. And there are so many parents that think that, my God, I want my children to be great pianists, and they kill them. They kill their soul, their spirit. What are we going to do about them? We hear these all the time.
How much, and I can't even remember the last time I heard somebody play, that they touch the instrument, and you say, this person loves the piano.
It's not every day.
I rarely hear it.
Oh.
I rarely hear it, because this, once again, that sense of love, that sense of the phrase, loving the music, that sense of serving, of willing to give yourself over to what the music wants to say. I rarely hear this.
But what about these parents that just destroy
because they don't
these
understand.
Kids?
They don't understand.
We have to stop this.
Well, I don't know how we're going to stop this, but I mean, look, you and I know, we've all lived a long life. The life of the soul is the only life that is worth living. The life of the soul is the only life. What else is there?
We have talked many times in our lives, and often we talk about not music, but literature or painting or culture, or just the despair of the human being not able to transcend himself. What's going on with this materialism which never lets up, and where people can't even write script anymore, that's not even taught? Something as primal as writing with a pencil instead of this printing, which has no personality. What are we going to do about this actual lack of culture and disdain for it? You have to fight this all the time with the cell phones, texting, never
all of
ending.
It. But basically, what you have to live your inner life. You have to protect yourself.
You have to protect yourself.
You just have to protect yourself. You have to not be. You're engaged with the world. Everybody's involved with the internet. Everybody's involved with social media. Everybody's involved with the news. Everybody's.
I call it anti-social media.
But all of this is going on. The fact remains is the life of the soul is extremely unique. It's solo. It belongs only to you.
But I'm frightened that it's going to be wiped out, as handwriting is wiped out. As sculpture has been wiped out.
It will be
poetry wiped out.
It will reach, I think, like so many things, it will reach a boiling point, and then there'll be, as we all lived through the '60s revolution and so on. I think it will reach a boiling point where there'll be a rebellion, because it's dissatisfying. It's dissatisfying. It does not, money itself.
It's been dissatisfying for a long time, though.
But in the end, there will be a counterculture. There's a counterculture, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on that we know nothing about. There's a kind of social revolution taking place underneath us right now. And even today, there are marches and so on, as we are speaking. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of things happening. Life is, we have to accept the fact that it is always evolving, that nothing remains constant. The only thing that remains constant is your self-image that you try to protect, your belief in yourself, your belief in your gifts, your beliefs in your talents, your beliefs in your legacy. I mean, this is where I am in my own life. I really believe in what I'm doing.
Well, you have been fierce in trying to keep creating a true legacy of all that you have learned, and we have the technology to preserve it, and you're trying very hard to do that.
I'm trying, and it may be sheer ego, but there's nothing wrong in that. We have this fantastic International Keyboard Institute and Festival. It's now in its 17th year. My lovely wife, Julie Kadersha, is the festival director. She is very important. She's the life's blood of how this thing is organized and it comes alive. And it has. One of the beauties of it, and we get these odes at the end of the festival and even years later, how important this was. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to make a cathartic moment in these young people's lives that would propel them towards something better or greater or more knowledgeable. And we've been able to do that. And I still, the experience at Marlborough, 1956, was a watershed in my life in terms of what is the meaning of music, what is the meaning of art, what is the meaning of culture and dynamism. And it is competitive because you are measuring yourself against other pianists, other musicians constantly. That's very good. It makes you better. It makes you better. Competition does make you better.
You have always been a wonderful organizer of things musical, the Library of Congress things you did and so forth. It's quite a bit of material that you've been able to do in that area, but nothing to compare with the International Keyboard Festival.
That was the one with the longest legacy. I actually, when you mentioned Franz Liszt, Liszt brought me to a whole world of art and painting and drama and literature.
Yes,
and
sure.
I did a Romantics Festival in London in 1981, which was a fantastic thing. It was probably one of my great ventures. But it taught me a lot about how to put a festival on and
Mm-hmm.
how to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went on in '86, I did the Liszt Festival. '97, I did the Schubert Brahms Festival at
Right.
the Library of Congress. I think you were there as well.
Mm-hmm.
You came down for that.
That's
so
right.
I was all a prelude to putting together a keyboard festival where I thought it would have this meaning and purpose. And once again, you learn from your mistakes, you learn from
Yes.
how to do it, and this has been a very important part.
But this part, you must go to sleep at night thinking, not, oh, this detail or this detail didn't work, but this is a vast accomplishment that you and Julie have put together. And it has never had any criticism. That's what's interesting. The 17 years, it keeps going, and it's not just performance, it's teaching. It's giving on different levels. Well, for instance, I'm always asked to talk to the elder statesmen. We've done Claude Frank and Pressler and so many, and you've made it clear that you want these things to be preserved on tape and all the concerts are there. How did you know it would be this successful, or did Julie keep pushing you when you were sometimes in?
I knew it served a very important
And you
purpose.
have to get them to come from all over the world, and
but it serves an important purpose.
Yes, of course
you
it
say
does.
You have a broach of cynicism, yes. You look at the world, yes and yes, but you have a hungry youth that wants something more. I loved your last lecture last year when you did the history of the American pianist, because in a sense that's who we are. We are of that legacy, and all the people that came here and lived, and all the influences that were, how should they flowered under our work, you know. And this is important. You have to understand, what I'm talking about in the way of the inner life and the transcendental world and so on. The young people are striving for the same thing. They want the same thing. Anyone who feels what it is to be an artist, what it is to feel alive, wants this for themselves. Consequently, what I'm trying to do is mirroring my own life and those around me, and giving this opportunity that there is something more. There is a better purpose. And this is why it served. This is why it has been successful. Because there is a spirit, there is a raison d'etre of why it exists. It isn't just lessons, it's lessons in life. And everyone is dedicated to a purpose. They love doing what they're doing. And the concerts are very important. People walk out on that stage, they love walking out on that stage because the audience says, give me, give me. I'm here because I love music and I want to hear a great concert.
Yes, Camus once said, cynicism is a product of intelligence, and you have to be able to start from that in a sense. And you've been able to take, no matter what despair you have felt about the world, and I don't know if you admit it as much as I do, but you have taken this festival and made it into a great gem. New York never had anything like this, and it's extraordinary that it has survived.
Well, David, you've been a part of this.
Oh, it's been a great honor for me.
Well, but you and I feel the same way. I mean, you've had countless students through Juilliard in Manhattan, and all your lectures and all your radio audience, which is vast around the world, and but because you're a propagator, you have a messianic purpose.
I have to do it. I have to do it.
You have to do it, and you feel compelled. You're in a way you've created yourself over and over and over again, and your importance has never diminished. And why should it? You know more. You give more. You should be more recognized. I mean, we're always looking for the newer stage, the world platform.
Well, you were recognized by the state University
so were you.
of New York.
You have your doctorate from the state of New York also.
Right.
And up here, there's the Bozzoni, there's the list, and then I have various people who are in my life, and my children are there, and my Julie's there, the marriage, and so on. And I'm blessed with 3 grandchildren and four wonderful children. And I had a successful first marriage, and my second marriage is even far more successful. I mean,
then you're a darn lucky man, aren't you? But you still want more.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I mean, every morning, there's a wonderful story about Andre Castellanos, and he was divorcing Lily Pons, and they said, "How can you divorce this diva, this absolutely gorgeous woman?" Mm-hmm. He said, "Just think. It's in the morning, and we get up, and she goes, how do I sound today?" He said, "That was our life. How do I sound today?" So in a way, can I play that damn piano? Can that Black Mariah? Can I drive this thing the way I want? And it's a daily thing. Every day you have to face, and it's facing yourself, because one of the problems of really knowing and understanding, is you cannot live in self-deception, and the fingers, of course, never lie. I mean, when you're stumbling, you know it instantly. I mean,
the world knows it.
And the world knows it. So this is a daily thing, and in a way, yes, these are the things you want in life. I want to be as good as I'm capable of. Mm-hmm. I want to be as good as I can. I feel that being less than I'm capable of is a deceitful and a compromising life of which I cannot be proud. And who knows? And the only person that knows that is me.
Yes.
Of course, unfortunately, my wife has heard me at my best. And if I'm not as good, she also tells me, you're not as good as you were. So I have a mirror of myself taking place all the time.
And you have more than a mirror. You have also the ideals of a long career and so many inspirations in it. So these ideals keep you going. Or as Busoni said, on a more mundane level, don't let a day go by without touching your piano.
Well, you can't. You can't. And what happens is there's a certain mental and physical atrophy if as soon as you get stiff, and of course at our age you get stiff very quickly.
What are you talking about?
We get stiff very quickly. So it's a matter of keeping it up, yes. But the most important thing is to dedicate yourself to a higher order. There is a religious component to every artistic life. You are dedicated to a higher order, and you understand the necessity of serving a higher purpose, and this is so very important. I think this is what art is all about: is serving the higher. Once again, I go back to the inner life and the transcendental moments that are so important in any existence.
This indeed is then the religious spirit.
Of course, I think every artist. I mean, they may not have. You don't. What is our church but our art? You know, our church is our art.
I've had a wonderful time speaking with my friend, colleague, Jerome Rose. I've wanted for a long time to get him to articulate on some of these, I think, very important messages. They're important because they're ideals, and in a world today we need many ideals. So we've, I think, discussed a great deal, and I hope that you're going to enjoy this and listen to it as many times as you may want to.